One of the things that I'm actually asked some of my senior team to look into to see, can we identify who are the folks who end up with, $100,000 or more dollars in debt, because that could be a real problem for them and a real barrier for them as they move through their careers and form families and want to buy houses and all of that. So it's one that I think any institution has to worry about. But I will say, we have changed in this country. There was a time when many more people saved and they financed big investments through savings. It's not that we don't do that in college. We don't do that anywhere in this country. We finance things through debt. People, it's the way people buy houses. It's the way people buy cars. It's the way people make large consumer durables investment. And increasingly, it's the way they send their kids to college, is they take out debt. So what you're seeing here is not any different than what you're seeing with regard to consumer spending in a lot of other areas. But it does have some long-term effects on particularly those students who get in over what they should. In terms of debt levels, and it's one that we just need to. I'm particularly concerned, as I say, that we focus on preventing the really extreme levels of debt. And there's very few students at UW-Madison who are in that category, but there's some, and we need to worry about that.
Have you already toured the Green Bay campus?
No, I'm actually going up there next.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm going to go meet with Chancellor Hardin and see.
Well, what can the university do to help those students? Besides lowering tuition, which is the UW system type job, what else can the university do?
Well, so, I am still learning exactly how we work with students in terms of admissions and financial aid. The question is is there some way in which we can provide some financial counseling to these students about, what are reasonable levels of debt, what are some alternatives? There are a lot of there was a time when many people worked their way through college. Every university in the country that I know of, in terms of big public universities, have become expensive enough that it's really hard to work part-time and pay all of your bills. But helping people to have some combination of savings, investment, work, loans. There's obviously, for people who are at lower income levels, federal assistance of one form or another, and making sure we do the best possible financial counseling for students and for their parents as they're looking at how they're going to take on 4 years of college.
There's a lot made these days about the skills gap.
Yeah.
And that people graduate with the skills needed for jobs. But what that doesn't take into account are the benefits of a liberal arts education. Yeah. Can you talk about those type of benefits that you see from liberal arts education? So
if you come to a place like UW-Madison, we're preparing you for a career, not a specific job. We're not a technical college where you prepare for a certain license or a certain apprenticeship. Careers come in many shapes and forms, and they follow many patterns. So one of the reasons why I'm a very strong believer in education in the liberal arts, whether that is psychology or dance and music or political science or the sciences, right? That's sort of the whole College of Liberal Arts, which spans all of those things, is that that whole mix, better than I, right? It provides them with critical thinking skills. How do you take an argument? How do you make it? How do you critique arguments that other people make? And it provides them with a base of knowledge about the world. It's one reason we have curricular distribution requirements. You have to take some social science, you have to take some physical and biological sciences, you have to take some humanities and arts. That not only in many cases produces someone ready for a career that's going to shift jobs, and we know from everything that we see in the economy that almost no one stays in the same job for their life, right? And with changing technologies and changing economy, many people end up in very different places at age 50 than they started at age 25, and they need to have the sort of preparation that gives them that flexibility, right? It prepares them for that type of a career. And you see that if you look out, for instance, at CEOs of big companies, an amazingly large number of CEOs have psych majors or history majors or English majors, and they end up at some point back in an MBA program, and clearly get other skills as well. But they will often testify to the value of that type of an education for the work that they're doing in terms of dealing with people, thinking broadly about issues, synthesizing information and putting it to work as they deal with problems. So I'm a very strong believer that at least for some number of people, liberal arts educations are very valuable.
What do you see as upcoming challenges for universities, particularly in Wisconsin?
Yeah, well, we've got an ongoing challenge in terms of finances, and that's not unique to universities in Wisconsin. Public education in general, and particularly higher education. For a long time, we had a long time in which there was sort of a social compact of the state financing a substantial amount of the costs of people's education, and people would pay a little bit on their own. And that compact got broken, and for no one's fault. The financial needs facing states in terms of where they had to invest their money just became extremely difficult to balance, and higher education, like a number of areas, gets a lot less state funding than it did before. So that means that I and all the other chancellors in the system, have to really figure out what the streams of revenue are. So we get only 15% of our funds from the state, okay? And we get a little less than 15% in terms of tuition. While tuition has gone up, tuition is not made up for the state dollars have declined from about 45% to 15% over the last 40 years. Tuition dollars have increased from 6% to about 12%. So, while we've made up a little of that with tuition increases, there's still another huge gap. And we at Madison have filled that through federal research dollars and through really working effectively and hard on private fundraising. And there's not a university in this country, public or private, that can survive without private fundraising these days. And the issue is not that these replace state or federal research dollars, but they leverage them. You fund things with private fundraising you cannot fund with tuition and state dollars that are important for your institution, such as a faculty chair, which gives someone professional recognition, gives them some additional resources for research or for salary. I've never been used tuition and state dollars to give individuals special recognition and extra money of quite that sort. But the private dollars can do that, and that in turn then leverages the federal research dollars and the state and tuition dollars in ways that help me recruit and retain really top faculty. So the financial challenges, and part of the problem here is you've got many more funding streams. All of them are about 15-20%, and many of them are variable to different. The federal dollars are declining right now because of sequester. Private donation dollars vary enormously over the economic cycle. State dollars are obviously uncertain. You never know till the budget is passed how much you're going to get there. And so with all of that variability, you've got to manage your revenue stream to a very stable expenditure stream. My expenditures don't vary. Creating financial stability for these big public institutions, mine or the one here in Green Bay, is really I think the biggest challenge that many of us face as leaders.
What does the system need from the high schools, from the parents, from the education system as these students come up?
That's a great question, and I think the system, all of us who are part of the system, need in part to work in partnership with the high schools, because we clearly need a stream of students applying to our colleges and universities who have the preparation and the skills to enter college. I know this is less true at UW-Madison. We don't have a lot of students who need to take remedial courses, but many of the comprehensive colleges have quite a high share of students who end up not prepared in math or not prepared in English, and the remedial courses don't give them credit. It simply gets them to the point where they can then start taking for-credit college courses. So you get students who spend a year taking classes and still have no college credit because what they're doing is making up for the lack of their earlier education. A strong K-12 educational system is incredibly helpful for a strong university and college system. And as I say, there are many people responsible for this, from the state to the localities, to the parents, to the communities, to the universities as well, that need to be working in partnership together. And clearly, there are places we just haven't done a very good job of that, both in Wisconsin and in other places around the country. So that's number one. Number two, I would say, this goes back to your question about student debt. You need to think about the fact that you want your kids to go to college. As an aspiration, you need to do some things when you work. Some of that is a little bit of savings, so that you don't have to rely entirely on loans or federal aid or whatever. Some of that is making sure that your kids understand the importance of doing well in school and getting that message across to them. And in that sense, communities and families, are important in terms of nurturing kids who understand at an early enough age where it makes a difference that how they perform in junior high and high school is going to be important for their long-term future. You can screw up a little bit. We all do at those ages. But if you screw up too much, you actually do make it a lot harder to go on into post-high school training. And that's a real problem. It's a problem not just for those kids, but in the short run, but in the long run for their earnings potential and for our communities in terms of the type of citizens and workers that we want.
What do you look for in a solid partnership between the colleges and the high schools and the community in that regard? What do you
Yeah,
say?
so some of this is good communication between our admissions officers and the guidance counselors and the teachers, right? And to a lesser extent the parents. What is it that we need and are looking for as we admit students, so people aren't surprised when they suddenly realize they can't get into UW-Madison. No one told me I needed to get A's or B's. The most important institutional connection we often have is through the schools and through their guidance and counseling systems, right? In a number of schools, I think we have played a more proactive role as a university, also trying to reach out to students who may be potentially first-generation college students, low-income families, who have less of a sense of what college and why college and what does this even mean. So, for instance, we run a program called the PEOPLE program, and I'm not going to remember what that acronym stands for, but it brings people in their junior year, students from low-income and disadvantaged families, from first families where none of their parents went to college, onto campus for a couple of weeks, and gives them some mini courses and introduces them to campus and has them stay in the dorms and talks to them about what they need to do to apply to college, and just gives them a sense that campus is a pretty cool place to be, and you can be here, you belong here if you're a good student and you're an intellectually curious person. And for many kids who have had no connections with universities or colleges, that type of introduction really matters. So we need to be about doing that sort of outreach.
What drew you to University of Wisconsin?
It's a great university. It is. It's been one of the top world universities for a long time, and being at a place that has a history of excellence matters to me in terms of what I think the opportunities are for the future. That's number one. Number two, I'm from the upper Midwest. Well, I've never lived in Wisconsin. I grew up in Minnesota and Michigan. I've lived in Michigan as an adult. I've been in Illinois. I honeymooned in Wisconsin. I've lived all around the state, and this is just it's a familiar area of the country. And there's a certain sense of coming home, of moving to Madison. And then thirdly, I just care enormously about these big public universities. I think they're so important to our society that they not just survive, but that they thrive. For all the reasons we've talked about, because of what they do in terms of educating people, because of what they do in terms of helping businesses and keeping this economy on the front edge of innovation. And, devoting myself to leadership at an institution like UW-Madison that has those goals strikes me as a pretty good thing to do with one's life at this point in time. So here I am.
So how were you Commerce Secretary background? How do you see that working with, as being chancellor?
Well, a couple of things. I mentioned the fact that I've spent a lot of time actually on the economic development issues and trying to say what is it that causes communities to thrive and what's the relationship between universities and areas that are growing rapidly and attracting new business. And I think I do bring some ideas and perspective there for things that we can be doing on campus to do even more, to be partners in the whole economic development agenda for the state. The second thing at Commerce is, I was for a number of years there basically the deputy secretary, which is the chief operating officer. So I was running a very large and complex public institution. We had 43,000 employees. We had a budget of around $10 billion. We had a very, Commerce is a fascinating place. It's a very complex place. It has everything from the National Weather Service to the Census Bureau to the Patent and Trademark Office to major international trade organization. It has a lot of big science in it in a variety of ways, and it has a lot of economics in it. I'm an economist by background, so that was fun. But running this big institution in a political environment called Washington, D.C., and in an uncertain fiscal environment isn't a bad background for coming in and running a large public institution in Madison that is also complex and has a lot of very different components inside it. So I think my management experience, my organizational experience, my political experience at Commerce matters, and then the substantive experience of what I was working on is actually very closely related to the whole idea of skills development and innovation. I mean, that's what we were doing at Commerce. That is what we're doing at the University of Wisconsin.
short weeks to immerse yourself a little bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what, as you
There's
get
a lot
around-
yet to learn.
There's maybe a little ways to go.
Yeah.
As you get around
Yeah.
the state and around the area, what are you hearing from? Are you hearing some standard messages coming from the places that you've been so far?
So I hear everyone, I should say, one thing that I've just, everywhere I've gone, in and out of the state, it was very clear when I first got named to this job from the email that I got. I've been very impressed by the deep level of devotion and commitment of Badger alumni to the University of Wisconsin, and that is just golden. You can't create alumni love and connections after they leave campus.
Pretty
So
amazing
it says that
around
we've
here, yeah.
actually been doing some good things on campus with our students, so they wouldn't feel the way they do, 40 and 50 years later, and continue to come back and participate. So I do again and again hear about how wonderful people's years were in Madison and at UW, and how much they felt they learned and grew at that time in their life, and for many cases, how much, the extent that they want to give back. They want to make sure that other students from today have those same experiences. So, I hear that all the time. I secondly hear, a lot of comments about real concern on, economic growth in the state and whether or not the university can and should be doing more to be part of that. And we've talked about that some already, that, clearly that's a theme that comes through. And then of course, I do hear regularly about people who sort of raise some of the concerns of, what's been happening in the state legislature, the whole firestorm we had this spring that resulted in, basically, we had tuition freeze. We were told we couldn't move forward with some of the HR, human resource flexibilities that we had planned, ready to roll out. There are a number of things that, have just made managing the organization a little more difficult. And, I hear both from the side of people who say, look, you weren't being transparent. You deserved to pay a price for that. And I certainly am not going to justify, our past, it's clear we need to be more transparent about how we do business and how we do our budgets. On the other hand, I also hear from people who are concerned that, this has created problems and, they don't want their biggest public institution to be in conflict with the state legislature. That's just counterproductive for everyone. The university system is too important to the state, and we need to find a way to be in partnership and not in tension with the legislature. And I very much hope that I can build the sort of relationships with the governor's office, with both sides of the aisle. Higher education should not be a partisan issue. We're sort of all in this together, and we're all going to benefit from it together. But we have to do our job on accountability and transparency.
Speaking to that, I don't know if you have any thoughts on Act 10. I mean,
Yeah.
that's obviously has caused a little bit of maybe hard feelings in the past few years with public employees, workers at universities.
Act 10 is the law of the state, and, we're working to make sure that we implement what we need to do. Clearly, this change has created the need for us to relook at the structures that we have in place for employee governance and voice. Voice is important, and if it's not coming through a collective bargaining process, we have to make sure that workers have other ways in which they have participation and feel that they're part of an organization that cares about who they are and how their work environment is situated. So we are trying to very much build a university that works effectively post Act 10.
And I know with UWGB there are some concerns that perhaps some of their instructors are underpaid compared to similar situations. Is it the same in Madison?
No, this is a real problem throughout the state. It's in part because of the very low salary increases for state employees, that have gone on for now a number of years. Our employees, we can benchmark against a pretty good set of peers who hire almost exactly the same people and have the same set of skills. 10 years ago, we were 5% under. I can run a university with 5% under. It causes me challenges here and there. By now, we are 20% under our peers in terms of our faculty salaries. And I, every day, hear about people who are leaving or people who have huge salary offers from elsewhere. The problem is it's a market out there. If I don't meet that market, my folks have national and in many cases international reputations and will get offers from elsewhere. And you could only so far say Wisconsin's a great place to live, Madison's a great place to live, surely you want to stay here. I mean, that might make up for the 5% difference. It doesn't make up for the 20% difference. So one of the reasons when I talked earlier about the need for financial stability and stable resources is that we need to make an investment in our faculty to make sure that we are basically at least somewhere near the market that they could be paid in virtually any other state.
Do you see any progress on that front or any potential there?
Well, it's one of the reasons why I think all of us were quite interested in getting some of the flexibilities from the state HR system that was embedded and that's now been delayed for 2 years, because that was going to give us the ability, both on a staff and a faculty basis, to do some things both for some of our lower paid and our higher paid faculty. And we just have some job classifications and some challenges that are really unique and different from those facing state employees in the Department of Transportation or the Department of Natural Resources. And the flexibility in HR to be able to do a little bit more to retain our top faculty, to make sure that our staff are being paid living wages that match the living wage in the city of Madison. Things that we can't do under the current HR system are just very important to us. And I'm hopeful that in 2015 we will get that flexibility, given we didn't get it in 2013.
Wisconsin's often seen as a party school, and perhaps at times it might overshadow some of the things it does. Is that a concern to you coming in as chancellor?
So I think nobody wants to be number one on the party school list, and we're not. Other schools are above us, but clearly we're higher on that list than some of our peers. There's clearly, you want students to come and have fun in college. You also want them to work hard, and you don't want the having fun to interfere with the working hard. My biggest concern is alcohol abuse, which is our biggest social problem, I think, on campus. There are other issues, but this is the one that comes up most often, and particularly around football games and on weekends. We have people who are, at one level, we have a small number of people actually putting their life in danger. If you look at some of the blood alcohol levels of students that we pick up and bring to detox units. But at another level are really, wasting the opportunity of what they have in front of them on campus with the abuse of alcohol, of not taking advantage of all the other things that they should be doing at this time in their life. So that's one that we just have to work on really seriously, and I know that's not unique in this state to the University of Wisconsin at Madison.
I don't know if you happen to see this or give any thought, but Time Magazine did a story on whether college athletes should be paid or not, being how much money they bring into the schools. Any thoughts at all on that?
So, this is an issue that's obviously being debated right now, and, it'll be interesting to see how it gets settled and in what way. There are obviously arguments both ways. We've had a long history of thinking of college athletes as student athletes, and I think there's an enormous value to that. And a limited number of our sports are actually revenue sports. So you do have this question of, well, do you distinguish the football team from the golf team, the crew team? Those are, those are, in some sense, from a point of view of, these debates about what revenue people are bringing in, those are quite different teams. So I don't know where that discussion is going to go. That's obviously one that we will be involved with at UW-Madison. We care a lot that our students are being treated the way they should be treated on the athletic team, and that they, my real concern is, I first of all want them to have a good experience as athletes, there's no question, but I also want them to be serious about being a student, so when they graduate, they do have careers in front of them, regardless of, whether those careers are athletic or not, that they have the skills that they need as they move forward. And I'm quite proud, actually, of the extent to which the university at Madison is been serious about that. And if you look at the grade point averages of our teams, they look pretty good compared to our peers. This is a place that has a long history of being as serious about the student side as it is about the athlete side. And I have to say, I give Gary Anderson enormous credit. I mean, he's just come in and hasn't put a step wrong. Both just coming in as a new coach and talking to the press and talking to the community. He's been great at that. And I sort of was watching this in August and saying, boy, I hope this guy can win football games. And, he's really shown he can. Yep. But, we've clearly got a big challenge coming up this weekend with Arizona. So,
he's had a tough acts to follow, too. Coming in behind Red It's not a simple thing, so he's done well.
Yeah, but it's a good team, and they look good for this year.
How about, and I don't know with what, I don't know numbers, but there's a lot of push for STEM, for girls getting more involved in those kinds of classes, even in middle school. Are you seeing, is that something that you're pushing for at the university level as well?
Yeah, I did a lot of sort of work on STEM-related issues at Commerce because we were quite concerned with that as part of the skilled workforce issue. I think there's a real concern across campus on graduating enough STEM workers to meet the demand in this country, first of all, and secondly, making sure that those workers really come from a diverse set of folks, and gender, getting more women into engineering, into math, into computer sciences is a piece of that. And I will say our engineering school, I think, has been very creative and done a reasonably good job of attracting a higher share of women than many other engineering schools in the country. And it's got some practices that I hope other people might look at and emulate. This is something, however, you can't start at age 18 or 19. How do you attract a wider group of people into engineering or into mathematics is, there's no simple answer to that. It has to do not just what happens in high school and junior high, it has to do with how we educate and attract people, from kindergarten on. It has to do with the messages that kids get in the community and messages they receive inside their family, the pictures that they see out there. One of the things I often said is, why is STEM so, why do so few people go into STEM fields in the United States compared to some other countries where we have about, 12-15% of our students graduate in STEM. There are countries where it's regularly 25 or 30%. What's the difference? Well, some of it is, what's the visibility of these fields in the public media? And, how often do you see, a TV show or a movie that shows people in laboratories, or scientists, or engineers, or mathematicians? You see a lot of lawyers, you see a lot of doctors, and doctors is partly a STEM field. You see a lot of people, but there's actually not a lot of serious science presented in the popular media and the popular culture. And I have said at times, my staff used to wince when I say this, and no doubt Greg back there will wince if I say it, but what we really need is a few movies and TV shows where there's a lot of steaminess going on in the labs and in the math departments, right? It's not just law firms, and sort of these are careers you should think about, and to think about them you have to feel like they're a little bit familiar. And if you and your family don't have anyone who is in a scientific or mathically oriented field, you're going to learn about this through the popular culture. And the popular culture sends almost no messages about
I was thinking that if
STEM
they do,
related.
it's usually like a mad
Or it's negative,
scientist.
right? They're complete nerds, and and so as I say, there's a large agenda here to increase our STEM attraction from what happens in Hollywood all the way to what happens inside families and in K to 12 schooling. That's, again, one of the attractions of this place is that history and that commitment to making sure that, people in this state have access to really good education.
And you're,
Good.
no, that's fine.
I was just going to ask, now heading over to
Yeah.
UW Green Bay,
Yeah.
what will you be doing? What is your agenda there?
Well, I mainly want to sit down and talk with Chancellor Harden for a while and, sort of get his sense of what his agenda is and what his challenges are and commiserate together on some things. I hope to see a little bit of the campus. And then from there, I'm actually going to a big alumni event over at Lambeau Field. And I've never been to Lambeau Field, so this is my first visit.
Do you expect to get back around again? This is
Oh,
early
I'm
on
sure.
in the process.
Yeah, I'm
so
sure.
we'll
It
see.
may be next year, but I certainly hope so. And I'm actually looking forward to summertime. I've been going around doing some of this other stuff, I'm checking off places I want to come back with my husband on vacation. So
Good, good.